We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's November 28th here in Seoul. I'm Shin-Yun, and you're watching News Generation. Joining me in the studio is Park Ki-hoon.
Thank you for having me.
Good morning, and Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. One way to commemorate the end of the year here in Korea is watching the annual Blue Dragons Film Awards, which looks back at the best films and actors of the year. This year's 44th Blue Dragon Film Awards came to an end on Friday. Another remarkable finish to note is actor Kim Il-soo's hosting. The Korean actress has been hosting the film award ceremony for the past 30 years since 1993. As the weather is getting colder here in Korea, the number of flu patients is on the rise. The KDCA found the proportion of patients with flu symptoms in the third week of November was 37.4 out of 1,000. This figure was around 6 times higher than what officials normally call flu season, and among the 6, most were aged 7 to 12. Generative AI is stepping into most areas of life, even religion. Here in Korea, there's a growing demand for a generative AI app that can answer questions related to one's faith or religion. One app called Choan amassed up to 40,000 new subscribers in a single month. Among those, 60% were in their 20s and 30s. Now, many who use these religion-based generative AI apps call this their AI god or AI pastor, mainly because they can comfortably ask questions that they refrain from asking their actual pastor because it could be a bit too personal or even inappropriate. These generative AI apps reportedly give out solid answers to deep questions as well. And here's a few questions asked, such as, why did God give me bad parents? Did Admiral Lee Sun-shin go to heaven? Do we need to pay actually for offerings? And users rated the quality of answers given with 4 out of 5 stars. And here in the studio, I don't know about you guys, but I was quite fascinated to hear this news story, to see generative AI step into realms where I thought only humans would be, like religion. What were your thoughts on that?
It kind of reminds me of that, 8-ball that you would shake and you'd be like, oh, am I going to win the lottery? And it says, ask again later. That kind of reminds me of this situation, but I guess now with technology. But, it was only a matter of time before we started seeing AI gods probably striking down on us. And I'm sure there are some conspiracy theories out there that an AI overlord will come down on a certain day to punish the human race. But honestly, as a non-religious man, I don't personally care, but for the sake of conversation, I do think it is quite silly. I think it takes a lot of the meaning out of religion. So I don't think this is the right way to go for religion. But I guarantee, and I also predict, that it will only be a matter of time before we start seeing AI cult leaders, as an example. And this can be very dangerous. And as we know, AI is still in the works. It's still got a lot of catching up to do with the world, and they could be spreading words and, I guess, things that are untrue or false.
False, and that's a hint to our discussion topic of the day. Now, what about you? What were your thoughts?
I wouldn't be surprised to see AI pastors preaching at church very soon. But it does seem a little scary that AI is taking over a lot of human-related activities, for better or worse. And I think we really need to be careful as to how much influence it will have on our daily lives and not to be too dependent on it just for now. However, if AI stepping into religion helps more people, especially the younger generation, get the answer they deeply want, yeah, I'm all for it. But I do agree with Walter. There will be definitely people who will manipulate this and take advantage and eventually create a new cult or even a new type of religion that will brainwash a lot of people in the wrong direction.
Exactly.
So I'm a little worried at the same time.
I think that's always the tricky thing with AI. Number one, it could be really efficient and really effective for you to answer questions in a really convenient manner. But if exploited, it could go too far. And that brings me to our main discussion topic of the day. Let's switch gears to find out what we'll be discussing today. Whether we can actually trust media outlets and news stories these days is a major concern across the world. And South Korea is no exception. My AI voice secretary will do the honors of explaining more in detail.
On the many pressing agendas, President Yoon Suk-yeol has pledged to tackle fake news poses a grave concern. Since Yoon was elected last year, prosecutors and police have repeatedly raided homes and newsrooms of journalists who have been deemed to be spreading fake news. Yoon's war against fake news has spurred concerns on the political front, though. Skeptics have pointed to how dangerous it could be for the government to determine what is fake and what is real.
Nevertheless, fake news is posing grave concerns, especially with the advances in AI technology, as we've mentioned in the news feed. Nowadays, we're seeing generative AI sometimes being exploited to make fake news stories, such as using deepfake technology to create images or videos that seem so realistic but are actually fake. And let's start our discussion here by analyzing how serious of an issue fake news is here in Korea.
You know, in the past, fake news were made with a concrete purpose, usually in politics to kind of change the minds of the general public. But nowadays, people create fake news purely to just make a profit, making the matter even worse and even more serious as everyone is connected these days. And in turn, any type of news can spread across the globe within minutes. Just like, you know, any kind of stuff on social media, like the slick back dance as well, for example. But you know, here in Korea, only 3 out of 10 citizens have faith and believe in the news. So according to a report released by Oxford University affiliate Reuters Journalism Research Lab, South Korea actually ranked 41st out of 46 countries researched. And they came last in the Asia-Pacific region. So
that's low.
It is a worrying concern. It is a worrying sign. And due to this lack of trust in the mainstream news outlets, many Koreans have turned their clicks to other social media outlets like YouTube and Instagram, which in turn, you know, exposes themselves to even more fake news.
Exactly, Yoon, you brought up a really good point. I think the lack of trust for our journalists and media outlets out there are putting people more prone into looking at social media outlets where we see a lot of generative AI take part. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, we're telling the truth, so you should listen to us. But yes, let me talk about more on a global scale, or just mainly what we see everywhere. I mean, this term was made more popular by the former US President Donald Trump. I mean, that's his main topic, his main word of every speech he made. But lately, it's getting harder to spot that fake news. With the fast evolution of AI, just about anyone or everyone can create something that can be seen as credible at the start. Now, going back to the former President Donald Trump, do you remember the time that he was deepfaked online during his trial, and there were photos online of him being carried. Looks like he was fighting against the police, and there was also a mugshot. Now, that could be actually seen as quite dangerous because a lot of his supporters could have gone down to the courtroom and rioted, and who knows what they could have been up to. So these days, you know, with the technology evolving and not knowing who to trust, it's very scary to see, you know, where people are, you know, or which side people are on when it comes to fake news.
Exactly, and that's why we need to pour attention into how to better detect what's actually real or not. But pundits are saying that our generation seems to be the most vulnerable. Why is that so?
Yeah, you're right. Many would think the older generation is more vulnerable to fake news, but it's actually the younger generation who lack the skills of distinguishing the difference between real and fake news. This is mainly due to our generation having more screen time, obviously, being the thumb generation in our daily lives. And spending more time online apparently reduces the ability to tell apart fake news because of the easy accessibility of social media, like I said before, and of course, multiple search engines like Naver and Taum, for example. So there are many different outlets and misleading content that really attracts the users, especially the younger generation, into misinformation. And later on, this really kind of influences them to grow a sense of a strong belief in a certain concept, making them have a really polarized mindset.
That's so true.
Is another worrying sign.
It's another worrying sign for society. And I think a lot of our people, like a lot of people from our generation, often share their stories like via Instagram or via Facebook, all on social media saying, hey, did you see this headline? Without better cross-checking whether this is true or not. They would be looking at, for instance, deep faked videos of Donald Trump saying Donald Trump recently went into jail when in fact it didn't really happen. So I do think that our generation could fall victim because of us being the thumb generation. But what other reasons are there?
Well, yeah, just to add on to Kyun's statement, I read quite an interesting article. There was a test done by the University of Cambridge psychologists over the span of 2 years looking at 1,516 Americans on how vulnerable they were to, you know, believing fake news. Now, they used 10 real headlines and 10 headlines created by ChatGPT. Now, overall, the population resulted in 65% being able to read fake news in a way that they know the difference between fake news and real news. Now, the 18 to 29 score quite high. 16 out of 20 actually could see the difference. But more interestingly, the older generation, I'm talking 65 and upwards, actually scored higher than the younger generation. And this kind of adds on to what Ki-Hun said, is because the younger generation, including people like ourselves, are the ones who are always online, who are always on social media. And to be honest with you, it's hard not to avoid news on social media these days. And so that's why we're more prone to probably believing fake news than the older generation.
But that's quite worrisome because, as Q mentioned before, our level of trust towards media is already so low. And if we see such fake news prevail on the internet, we're going to continue to fall victim and our mistrust is going to pile on. It's going to be a snowballing effect. So to better understand what we can do to tackle this situation, we're now going to include an expert in our talks. Stay tuned for our live interview. We're now going to include an expert who can further analyze what we should do to better determine what's actually fake news. Also, to help us gain some insight on what we should do about this issue. Let's talk to Professor Jeffrey Blevins, a professor of journalism and public and international affairs at the University of Cincinnati. Welcome, Professor.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
All right, Professor Blevins, I would like to ask you the first question. How prevalent is fake news nowadays around the world, and to what extent can it harm society? Are there any real-life cases that show how damaging fake news could be?
Well, it is prevalent, and I really enjoyed listening to your in-studio conversation. You did a really great job of analyzing the problem. But I think we need to kind of define our terms a little bit first. If we're talking about fake news in that it's something that's disguised as something it's not, like from a legacy outlet, a more traditional media outlet, whether it's AI generated or it's a deep fake, yes, that's fake news. And we see a lot of it, particularly when there is crisis and a lot of emotional turmoil. So, take, for instance, the war between Israel and Hamas. We've seen a lot of fake news that has been generated around that conflict. There was one of the more damaging, I think, reports that I saw was a faked, video that looked like it was coming from BBC, and it was suggesting that Ukraine was supporting Hamas militarily and financially, which isn't true, but it was meant to stir up more outrage. And that is it's prevalent and it's dangerous, but I think what makes it even more dangerous is that we have conflicting definitions of fake news. So, for instance, Korean President Yoon, as you mentioned, and former U.S. President Trump, they use the term fake news as a pejorative to talk about you all and me and the type of journalism that we do if they don't find it favorable. And I think this is what confuses a lot of people. It puts fake news and real journalists on equal footing, and people don't feel like they can trust either one, and that's really unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, it's a snowball effect.
Professor, so how can we determine whether something is fake news or not?
Well, we really have to rely on our own critical instincts, and there are a few red flags that I always suggest people look for. The first is if it's on, for instance, social media, and it says proof or evidence or this is the truth. That is not the way that journalists, report, and that's not the you read our report, you watch the news, and you make up your own mind. So something that has those words should be a red flag. And also, is it something that is outrageous? Do you feel outraged? So take the example that you gave of former President Trump being tackled and manhandled in a court. Why would someone on YouTube have the only video of this. If this were accurate, every news outlet would be reporting this. So ask yourself, why is this the only outlet that seems to have this? And from there, I suggest that we start looking for other sources as well, sources that are local or regional. That we know the anchors, we know the reporters, they're in our community. Start there.
And most importantly, what types of regulations are needed to better detect fake news and to stop fake news from spreading itself?
Well, I have to admit, I'm not a fan of regulation. I think regulation can do more harm than good. Because do we really want any political party, any political interest to be the arbiter of what is true or what is false, but particularly if it involves political speech? But it does leave us with a bit of a problem because, at least in the U.S., we have relied on industry self-regulation. But even when social media outlets are making an earnest effort to police this stuff, it really is kind of a whack-a-mole approach. In the sense that you're always responding to something that is false and misleading, and it's out there and it's had an effect before you figure it out and can shut it down. And by the time you close that account or flag it, it's going to show up someplace else as well. So there's not much that you can do about it that way. Although I still think it's good for the industry to make a good faith effort. But if they were regulated, say like, okay, you have to, prove the veracity or, of all the content that's posted by third-party users, well, then social media really is no longer social media anymore. One of the things that's great about social media is that it is immediate, right? And it has helped, actual journalists and citizen journalists to do really good reporting, where they can be in places and can live stream and show things that are happening now. So we could do more harm than good, I fear, by requiring some type of industry regulation as well. I think the only regulation I think I like would be self-regulation, and by self-regulation I mean each of us practicing our own, critical media literacy skills, and whether that's, questioning, hey, just because a celebrity posted this doesn't mean it's true. A celebrity is not the same as a journalist. Also, something going viral, something being popular does not necessarily mean accuracy as well. And that's usually the financial incentive for people who are, posting fake news, not necessarily for any type of political interest, but simply for financial gain. They want to get clicks and likes, and they can generate revenue that way. So cross-check it with with your local and regional media. And if something is you're really uncertain about something, call your local news, send them an email, and ask them to fact check it. In the U.S., the USA Today has a whole team of fact checkers, but even local news outlets like here in my city, Cincinnati, local reporters love getting that stuff. It's like, hey, you just gave us a news tip. So
exactly.
That would be my best recommendation. Yeah.
Right. Developing our own critical insight and having better media literacy, whether that be through education or better interacting with journalists, seems to be the key. Thank you so much, Professor Blevins.
Oh, absolutely. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and we're going to end our discussion off by giving our own few tips as to how to better tackle and detect fake news. And Kyun, why don't you do the honors of explaining your own tips to our viewers?
Sure. I'd like to share some tips set forth by an institute in America called Fact Check. Let's take a look at the screen.
All right.
So here are 3 simple steps. Number 1, identify news source, writer, supporting evidence, and creation date. 2, read the whole news article. 3, reflect on your personal views. So I think this is very important because, like what the professor said, we need to really cross-check and have better, journals literacy. But I think, our view, people in general, we want to read what we want to read and believe in what we want to believe in and just listen to what we really want to listen to. But I think that really makes us really polarized and not really open to different kind of suggestions and different facts as well. So I think having a bit more open mindset could really help us tell the difference between real news and fake news.
For sure, and if I expound upon that a bit, I think the professor mentioned another really important part is whether regulation would actually be the right way to go, because given that social media is an open and free space, the pros there is that we have much more better discussions and sometimes even raw evidence, but then if exploited, it could go the wrong way. But whether a government or politics get involved, that's a tricky issue there. But apart from that, Walter, what are your few tips for our viewers out there watching NewsGen on how to better tackle fake news?
Well, I think that the professor really hit on a great point. And since he was against regulation, self-regulating is an amazing thing to do. I think that comes down to double checking, triple checking your sources, going a little bit further to make sure everything is true, rather than just seeing the first thing you see and then just counting it as true. Now, it does mean that you have to go to a little bit more effort of understanding the whole topic itself. And I know we are an impatient society, and our generation just wants to quickly scroll through and get the information as fast as possible. But given the fact that in the state of the world at the moment, it is really important not to believe everything that you see online. Otherwise, you could end up making things a lot worse. So yes, self-regulation is the best tip, I think.
Yeah, and though traditional media might even fall victim into all these generative AI taking over and making it into fake news, try contacting journalists out there like ourselves so we can better guide you into how to better detect what's real and fake. In the meantime, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Park Ki-hoon
Always a pleasure.
and Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
All right, thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
News Generation.